Conservative MP Ben Bradley. Ben, so good to have you on the programme. Good afternoon to you. Now, you're somebody who really knows about this in a way that many MPs do not. So explain your position and how come you're such an expert on council funding.
Well, I wouldn't call myself an expert, but hopefully the fact that I am both a Member of Parliament and the leader of Nottinghamshire County Council, which is one of England's largest councils, means I do have that unique perspective. I'm going through that budget setting process right now. And it's not easy, I have to say. Councils across the country are under significant pressure, particularly from rising demand and cost of our key services around children's care and adult social care in particular.
I mean, is it true that when you took on this demanding role as head of the council, you thought, what? Well, I really must have a bash at this because so many council leaders are really not much cop at it. They're doing an absolutely botched job and I will do a far better one. And once you got there, you found it wasn't really quite as easy as you had thought. Or is that just a cruel rumour about what you thought?
I don't remember having said that at all, Vanessa. I think the reason I wanted to do it was because I wanted to have the levers and the budgets to make decisions locally that impact my community. And councils are a great place to do that. I'm fortunate in the fact that my council is in a relatively decent place. We're not about to go bankrupt at all. But across the sector, there are all sorts of councils who are struggling. We have had a conversation about how many councils who have gone bust. You look at Nottingham and Birmingham, there are very obvious things that they have messed up on a local level. But you're also now talking about councils that historically are well run in all sorts of areas in the country, all sorts of political control, who are struggling to see beyond the next kind of 12 months and how they make the budget meet. That's why we're calling on government, really. Chancellor's been talking about this £10 billion of headroom over the weekend that he's found for some of that to come to local councils to protect those services in your community. That's your youth centres, your children's centres, your libraries, things that are really important to people.
I mean, I once locked horns rather memorably with the chairman of Croydon Council. And Croydon Council had done all manner of ill-advised things. I think it's not just my opinion, but is proven fact, including all sorts of property investments. And none of the people investing the residents of Croydon's money in property knew a damn thing about property. That's why the investments were an embarrassment and a colossal fiscal failure. The idea of the government having to step in to top up failing and fading finances when often they're due, as you yourself have just said, to council mismanagement or ineptitude or people being put in charge of enormous multi-million-pound budgets who really don't have the business training. They may have the will, but they don't have the smarts and they don't know how to distribute the money and how to make it go further. Remember all that council money involved and invested in Iceland when the Icelandic banks went fut and nobody could believe that they had any money to invest. Everyone always thought that councils were operating on such a shoestring. They were looking behind the sofa to find a couple of pennies. They didn't think they were investing money abroad. All sorts of things have been going on. I think lots of people think manage council budgets properly and the government shouldn't have to top them up.
Well, I think there's two different stories here. One is exactly as you described, councils who have done, frankly, stupid things and wasted money. And I've named a couple, Birmingham, Nottingham, very recently, who were in special measures. Robin Hood Energy cost Nottingham City Council 60 million quid. And that's why they haven't got the resilience to manage the current pressures. But there's also another story here. The whole sector is under pressure. And if it were just a case, as it has been, that councils who've messed it up were getting into problems, Croydon is another one that you mentioned that has gone bust, right? If it were just those councils, then that would be one thing. But we're now in a place where even well-run councils, even councils that have a good record of financial prudence are struggling. And that's because the cost of certain services that are statutory requirements, things we have to deliver quite rightly around children's residential care, for example, special educational needs, transport. The cost of those has gone through the roof due to COVID, due to inflation. The same pressures that people have on their household budgets, we also have on council budgets. And we don't want to spend the year having to cut back on important services in people's communities at a time when they most need them, because people have their own budgetary pressures, as I've just described. So a little bit of help from the Chancellor's headroom would help us to both deliver tax cuts and better public services. And I think that's a good outcome for everybody.
Ben Bradley, thank you very much indeed. Let me just ask my panel here what they think of that before we talk about anything else. Alicia Fitzgerald is here, Jonathan Lis, the political commentator, Charlie Rowley. Say thank you all for coming. We don't need to involve Ben in this. He's set out his stall. Let's start with you, Charlie. Is he right to say even well-run councils are running short of cash? The government needs to step in before really serious frontline and important frontline services start not to be delivered?
Well, there will be some councils who have run their finances very, very well that will find difficult times, but will have to look at themselves first, because the money has to come from somewhere. And if it's not coming from central government, it's coming from the UK taxpayer, it's taking away from another council that might need the money even more so. So councils really have to get a grip of their own finances. They're always traditionally asking for more money because of the services they deliver, and I'm not attacking them, but there'll be some councils, as Ben rightly said, do better than others.
I mean, Jonathan, the punchline in every discussion on this programme and every discussion in every other programme is always the same thing. We need more money, whether you're a junior hospital doctor, whether you're a train driver, whether you're running the neonatal unit in a hospital, whether you want to keep a school library open. It really doesn't matter what it is. The punchline is always give us more money. We need more money. Don't know if the money is there to give all these entirely deserving causes. It'd be great if everyone could have more money and a free turkey at Christmas.
Well, it's a great advantage that we have our own central bank and that the government can borrow for things that aren't sort of, trust like tax cuts for the richest, but are actually investing in infrastructure. That's always been the way that we can sort of print money responsibly and also borrow money responsibly for things that the country palpably needs, which is, sort of namely sort of public services that actually run. I think the other point that we need to make is that councils are taking on far more responsibilities than they used to. For example, sexual health. There was a story of the weekend about sort of sexual health services across much of England on the brink, which is actually a very serious issue. It's not just a nice to have, it's a necessity. And part of the reason for that is it's now gone from outside the NHS's remit into local government, but without the necessary funds to pay for that. So councils are simply having to do more with less money or the same amount of money. And obviously, with inflation being what it has been for the last year, that money is simply not going as far as it was before.
Alicia Fitzgerald, the idea that just give them more money, they can't balance the books, it's very, very difficult. They're providing really essential stuff, so give them more cash. Come on, is that viable? Is that possible? We know, for example, that Sadiq Khan, Mayor of London, found a whole hell of a lot of money. I don't know where he'd been hiding that money all along, or whether it was under the stairs in an old shoebox along with his love letters, and he suddenly came upon it when he was doing a little bit of early spring cleaning. I don't know how he suddenly found it, but boy, he did find it. So would the government find suddenly money for local councils?
Well, it's all just a case of priorities, really, isn't it? As you just mentioned, there are so many different sectors in the country right now asking the government for more money. The question before the election is now, where will the government put that money? What are the most important things? I think for lots of people, councils are really important. People forget that's our bins, it's our social care. It's a lot. It impacts absolutely everyone where they live. So I think councils are really important, but will it be the thing that people really prioritise leading up to the election? Maybe not.
Might though, mightn't it, Charlie? Because it really is, as Alicia says, not just on your doorstep, it's your actual doorstep itself. It's the door, the step, the door handle, the bell, the postman, the potholes. It's all the stuff that's really there. You can see, smell sometimes, unfortunately, and desperately need to be dealt with urgently, isn't it?
Well, it plays into the Labour narrative that, the Britain isn't working or things just don't work. And if you've got, a community full of potholes, as you say, if your rubbish isn't being collected, if you've got your education services, school buildings crumbling down, or you're not getting the healthcare for elderly people, because as Alicia was saying, it's county councils traditionally that deal with adult social care. If these things aren't working, then it certainly plays into the narrative that Britain isn't working. And if it's only about money, then of course it makes it very difficult for the Conservative Party to say, well, we're not giving you the money if that's what's going to solve the problem. But as we all know, just giving money to services doesn't fix the root problems of why some of these services are not as funded as they, or delivering as they should be.
You will have noticed Charlie's use of the word narrative about 3 or 4 times in that sentence. It's almost obligatory these days. You can't say anything without calling it a narrative. You're never quite sure whether it's a pejorative term, whether it's a descriptive term, whether it's an accurate term. Anyway, the narrative, as he calls it, that councils aren't working and things aren't working and the Tory government isn't working and that the Labour government really needs to gallop in and rescue the country. Is that a narrative, or is it simply a statement of fact? Is it just true?
I think it's both, because obviously when you have things that are happening, you also need a media that is able to craft those stories, and people need to sort of figure out stories in their own head so they can decide if things are good or bad and what might be the solution if they're bad, or indeed if they're good. Is the solution to good things to carry on with the government you have, or to choose a new government? So narratives are really important in the same way that optics, which is another kind of buzzword, is important.
That one, Alicia.
But
we hate that one, optics.
There are important ways of thinking about politics, because the way that politics are presented is the way that we present politics on these programmes. What is the optics of this? We discuss it. How is Rishi Sunak looking? Because it's vitally important for the public to think to decide what they think about certain things and why they think about certain
public
things.
are intelligent and discerning.
Of course, but they still have
desirable,
narratives, though.
incredibly sexually attractive viewers and listeners here at TalkTV are discerning and sagacious enough to see through narratives and optics and know that they're being presented with a storyline that may be fictional and utterly elaborated and invented by God knows who, spin doctor, and also to know that optics are specially created to look a certain thing when they're not really a certain thing. Alicia, come on, don't let him get away with optics and narratives, please, not on this
Well, I was just going to say, I use the word optics all the time,
No,
so I felt a bit
don't.
attacked there. I'm really sorry. It's so easy to do, though, and I think you're both right in the sense that there are so many things at play here, and I think the trouble is politicians historically, they, especially in the run-up to election, they choose sexy topics. And I'm not for 1 minute saying that Rwanda scheme is sexy, that's not what I mean, but it's snappy, it's catchy, people know what it is. Saying, oh, councils are going bankrupt because they need a bit more money, that doesn't make a good headline, and I'd love to think that that's not the way politics works, but it does to an extent, and we can't forget that.